Right, we're ready to trim out the bathroom window. Remember when we were installing it, we already put on the side pieces and the top. These help to secure the window in place to begin with. The next step is to put the sill onto the window. That's this horizontal bottom plate. When we have an irregular shape like this, I like to draw it out on paper, not to scale at all, but just so that all the sides are shown and I can get the measurements for each of them written down. I can take this drawing and draw it onto the piece of wood before cutting. Makes it really easy to check our measurements twice before we actually cut into this piece. Looks pretty good when we put it up against the window. We're gonna cut these parts out with a jigsaw and then use a round over bit on the router to round off the outside edge. All right, so now the top and bottom of this entire outside edge here has been routed and rounded off. There you get to kind of look at the profile of it. The only part we didn't round off is the back, which is going to touch against the window and the wall. I just fit the sill into place and it looks really good except for over here where we have this big gap. Now some areas with gaps like right here, no big deal because there'll be a piece of trim board there. But unfortunately, that's not the case right here. This is gonna have to be fixed. So my plan right now, you can see it's pushing tight up against the window here. I'll have to take a little bit off here and over here. If I shave just a little bit where it's touching here, I think that'll give a little bit more room as well. All right, this is what I'm thinking of taking off right here where it's marked. Might have to do one more round of cutting. I really hope this works. All right, I just cut that piece and fit it in and it's actually looking pretty good. I want to show you here. This is how it looks when it's fit into place. Now, there's a little bit of a gap where it touches the window, but that won't matter because we're gonna have a piece of cord around there eventually. You have a little bit of a gap over here, but that also won't matter because eventually our window trim will be sitting down on it like this. So before getting that trim installed on the window, the next step is to take some caulking and go all up and down the sides, anywhere where there's a nail hole or a joint in between the boards, anywhere where air could get through. What happens is that especially on windy days, you can get low pressure outside and higher pressure inside. Basically, that takes the air from inside and sucks it into the cracks behind this woodwork. Now in the winter, the air inside is usually going to be warmer and wetter. So when that air sucks in behind the woodwork, that water deposits somewhere inside the wall and it has no place to escape. So it gets trapped there and causes problems. Sometimes you'll get this situation here where you line up your miter real nice, then you go down and you see the board drifts way too far to the left or to the right. What I like to do in that case is really get the miter joint secured as tight as I can first. I nail it in around this corner, I push in a backer board right along the joint, making sure it goes all the way in and it's not sticking out up top or on the side. And now get that nailed in real tight. And now I just begin to secure it in one by one. I'll put a nail in here, bend the board out a little bit the way it needs to go, put another nail in here, and just keep working my way down. The idea is that the board itself will bend a little bit and I won't separate that miter joint too much. To show you how that worked out, you notice we barely got any separation here, just a tiny amount. But if you go down to the bottom, it lines up just as it should now. On the right side of this door trim, we run out of real estate and we end up having to cut the side of this board, but it's not an even cut because that wall bows in and out. It's really curved. So whenever we have this, I don't know if you can see how uneven this board really is. It's almost kind of ridiculous that a new board would be going on in this condition, but it does fit pretty well. We take it all the way down and actually fits against the wall kind of nice and sticks out to where we want it to. So I'm going to get this installed. As we get to wrapping up this window and door woodwork in the bathroom, we're at this final stage where we're adding this perimeter piece to the woodwork. And the reason we're doing that is because we have a big gap between the plaster and the woodwork that we need to cover up here. Now this is one more time where we need to use the tracer block method, and we've been through this before in other videos, but it can still lead to a lot of confusion. And even after so many times of doing it, I still need to think pretty carefully about what I'm doing. So unless you really have to use this, you don't want to because it's kind of a pain in the butt. So let's look at the reasons why you need to use this in the first place. The tracer block method is needed when you're going to take a material and butt it up to a surface that's uneven or irregular. So in this case, we're taking a piece of wood and we're butting it up into the wall here that's uneven. And we're not just talking about any uneven surface. If it were a matter of it just being smaller on the bottom than the top, but the difference was linear, we could just use our tape measure, make a smaller mark on the bottom, a bigger one on the top, then take a straight edge, connect the two lines and cut it with our table saw. We're talking about irregular surfaces that are curved or wavy in some way, or bowed in or out in the middle. We ran into this situation when we were putting the floor up against this tub right here. And we're running into it on this woodwork too. Take a look what happens when we put this up against the wall. It's tight on the top and it's tight on the bottom, but there's a really big gap in the middle. So we need to trace out the contour of this wall onto the wood and then make our cut. Normally when we're tracing something, we would like to take our irregular surface, let's say it's a skinny board, we would like to set it on top of the material we're going to cut, and then we would just trace it out and then use that line to make our cut. But we can't do that in these situations because we can't move this wall out and butt it up against the side of this board to trace it. Just like we weren't able to lift up this tub and set it on top of the floor tiles to trace that out. It's exactly these situations that we need to use the tracer block method in. So I'm going to show you how to set this up. The crux of what we're going to do in this method is that we're going to fix our board to be cut at some distance away from the irregular surface. In this case, we have the board spaced a little ways out from the wall that's curved. Then we're going to cut a tracer block that looks like this. It has a curved end that can move smoothly on the wall, and it has a little notch in the side that will fit our pen. Then we're going to take it, put our pen right into the notch, and trace a line down that will follow the contour of the wall. Remember, the line that we'll be drawing to cut is the part that goes up against this wall, and this front part is what we'll be keeping. But before we fix that board into place and start doing any tracing, we want to get one measurement first. We want to determine what the width of this cut is going to be at some given point along the cut. So for example, I would like this to stick out 1/4 inch past the existing window trim. Now that measurement is going to be different at every point along this cut. So we just need to pick one point and make that our reference point. I'll go at the very top. So we would like this to be 1 7/16. Now we take that reference measurement and we mark it on our actual board. But it has to be at the exact right spot. So at the very top is where we did it. Let's mark where the top of this board will be. And remember, we're going to measure the 1 7/16 from the front of the board because our cut's going to be made in the back. The next step is to fix our material in place for tracing. So what we need to do is get it aligned exactly with its final position, except space some distance away from the irregular surface. How far away exactly it's spaced from that surface doesn't really matter. We'll cut our tracing block later for that exact length. But it needs to be aligned with its final position and parallel to its final position. What I mean by that is, in this case, it has to be vertically in the exact place that it's going to be. Notice that I put the bottom right up against the sill. That's where it's going to be in its final location. It also has to be parallel, meaning it can't be tilted too far this way or too far this way. It has to be parallel with its final position. Here I've used the existing window trim as my reference line and just butted it up straight against that. When we were doing the floor tile, what it would mean is that our floor tile has to be not too far to the right or too far to the left. It has to be in the exact spot it's going to sit. It also has to be parallel. It can't be going like this or like this. It has to be on its final reference line, but some distance away from the surface. Finally, we need to build our little tracer block. But how long should it be exactly? Well, remember that reference line that we made on the board before. What we want to do now is measure the distance from the wall, or whatever the irregular surface is, to that little reference line we made before. Looks like we're going to be almost exactly at 3 1/4 right here. So look what happens now with this tracer block. When I take this and put it up right at where our mark was, the pen falls right on our reference line. Now we go ahead and trace it out. It's a lot thicker in the middle and thinner on the bottom, as it should be, because the wall bows in the middle. Now I'm gonna go cut this with the jigsaw. Piece is cut, looks like this. And when we set it down on here and push it against the wall tight, it fits nicely up against the wall, and we get that nice 1/4 inch consistently up and down the whole board. So now I just got to do the exact same thing for the 2 other pieces on this window. I'm going to go do that right now. Now we get a look at it when all of the pieces are installed. I didn't film the installation because it's kind of the same as what we've seen before. They're installed with miter cuts in the corners. Started putting some putty on already. The woodwork's almost painted now. You can see the painter's tape around the sides. When you look closely on these sides, even though it hugs the wall really tight, there are some gaps that the paint isn't gonna fill. And especially with the light color paints that we're using here, those little gaps are gonna show up. It's gonna have to be covered somehow. We could either use a quarter round or some other type of small flexible trim, or we could caulk it with a paintable caulk, which is what we're gonna do here. After just a little bit more painting and touch-up, this window and door trim project is in the books. Now let's go tackle the baseboards here quick before we wrap up this video. The first step is to bring the boards out to the garage for some routing. I'm using a Roman OG bit here to match the profile of the trim in other rooms of the house. We're using 1x4s for the baseboards in the bathroom instead of 1x6s because the bathroom's a smaller room. The 1x4s seem to fit a little better. This baseboard is being installed on an exterior wall, so I like the idea of using a sealant behind it. Eventually, the bottom of the board will be sealed as well. I've countersunk some pilot holes to screw this into the wall studs. Using the framing nailer on a 1x4 board probably isn't a good idea. There's a good chance it would split the board. Wood plugs will fill the holes. Just apply a little glue and tap it in with a hammer. After the glue dries, we give it an initial sanding, then putty over the top. And after the putty sets up, sand it down again. Then just paint over it and we're done. And other than a few pieces of quarter round, the trim work in the bathroom is finished. Be sure to join me next time for the final project in this bathroom renovation, constructing built-in cabinets in the space between the bathroom wall and the tub surround. See you next time.